This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell in the studio today with the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar. Last week, we spoke with the composer Lowell Liebermann about his new cello concerto, which receives its world premiere this weekend, October 27th and 28th, at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle. You can find more information on that, by the way, at ToledoSymphony.com or at 419-246-8000. Now, this week, we are going to have a conversation with the cellist who will be performing Lowell's new concerto this weekend. That is cellist Julian Schwarz, who joins us right now on the phone. Julian, welcome to Toledo Symphony Lab.
Thanks for having me.
So, why don't we begin with your history with Lowell Liebermann? Is this the first time that you're playing his music?
Actually, no, it's not. I met Lowell in 2010 when I was playing a concerto with the Virginia Symphony. It was the Haydn Concerto in C, and before the concerto was a premiere of Lowell Liebermann's Third Symphony. And I had been a big fan of his music prior, and I got to hear three performances of the Third Symphony, which I loved, and with Joanne Falletta conducting. And we were staying in the same hotel, and we got along famously, and we really enjoyed each other then. And a few years later, we were both invited to the same chamber music festival, the Cape Cod Chamber Music Festival, where he was actually a composer in residence and pianist. And there, I performed his second piano trio with him and a violinist, and a few other little pieces. And recently, I've performed his first cello sonata quite extensively, actually, in recital tours with my pianist partner, Marika Bornacki. So we've really had such fun and a wonderful relationship over these years, and it's always been my intention to somehow get him to write a cello concerto because he had not written one yet, and I just such a big fan of his, and to be able to bring a piece like this forward is very exciting.
How did it transpire in the beginning? He was commissioned, I assume. Did he decide that it was going to be you to premiere it, or what was your involvement? Well,
because we're such close friends, I planted the seed early, which I said, maybe it was 5 years ago, I said, wouldn't it be something if you wrote a cello concerto? And wouldn't it be great if you wrote a cello concerto for me? And I kept planting the seed a little bit, and of course it's just talk. Because
you will write a cello concerto.
Right. No, I there were no threats, but I really was just so excited at the possibility. Problem is that he's really famous, and he's well known all across the world, and he's written some of the most famous pieces. Some of his like the piano piece "Gargoyles" is one of the most often performed pieces in the piano repertoire, actually, and his very famous flute sonata and flute concertos. There's a lot of music that. And he's so often asked to write pieces. So to even get him free enough to write a piece for especially a concerto, a 25-minute concerto, is difficult. So I just kept thinking about it and how could I do it? And a model for commissioning new works of music is to get many parties involved.
Right.
So what I did is I started putting feelers out, and he has a huge following, and there are also people that like me and want to have me play pieces. And the interesting thing about being a cellist is that though it has a lot of solo repertoire, the instrument, it doesn't have as much as the piano or the violin.
Right.
So if I go to an orchestra and play the standard concertos, then there needs to be a future for what I come back and do next. What can be exciting? What can be interesting? And bringing a famous composer to write a cello concerto is really the something I think that all the great soloists have done. Most notably, Mstislav Rostropovich, who who was responsible for the premiere and commissioning of both the Shostakovich concertos, the Prokofiev Symphony Concerto, many others that are less well known, but those are standard repertoire now. So my idea is to try to commission the composers I love and believe in, with the hope that someday they'll become part of the standard repertoire.
Yeah. Zach, you have something you want to chime in with there?
One of the neat things, Julian, you might not know this, is that our orchestra has a interesting relationship with Lowell Liebermann. So the last major piece that we were involved with as a commission was his Concerto for Orchestra, but that was 15 years ago. So
Wow.
when the concept came up that we would be able to work with another world premiere of his music, and that happened thanks to you, the bookends are remarkable, because he was here 15 years ago. That the intention at that point was that we would have concerti for orchestra coming out of many wonderful composers, and we kind of started it and then we stopped it. So as we kind of re-engage with our sense of new commissions, the opportunity to work with Lowell again was really kind of perfect. And of course, the opportunity to work with you again is just a wonderful homecoming for us and our relationship with you.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. And Lowell told me that the Toledo Symphony had premiered his Concerto for Orchestra, but I didn't know it was so many years ago.
It was really interesting. It was fortuitous. You have one of these sorts of synchronicity moments. So I've been president of the orchestra for a little over a year now, and before I took the job, I didn't even know about the job. I was reading Gramophone, and they interviewed Lowell about his career, and they asked if you had a piece of yours that you could call your favorite child. You know, it's impossible to choose, but he said the Concerto for Orchestra, and it was premiered by the Toledo Symphony.
So?
And I thought, well, that's kind of neat to have that memory. And then alongside that, recording had come out that was recorded soon after the premiere, but it was not released for a number of years. BBC Symphony and Grant Llewellyn, who conducted the premiere here, had recorded it. So I picked up a lot
of connection.
Yeah, I picked up that CD, and then I end up coming to the orchestra. And as I'm cleaning up my office and moving in, I found a copy of the score in one of the cupboards, and that kind of led me to remember this work and kind of re-engage with it. And then about 2 weeks later, the concept of being lead orchestra and consortium for your cello concerto ended up being just too perfect. So,
I'm so glad to know the ins and outs, the details. That's such a great story.
Yeah, coming full circle. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's totally coming full circle, and especially when there's so many relationships. Of course, my relationship with the orchestra, having played with the Toledo Symphony just a few years ago in the Haydn Concerto, and of course my relationship with Lowell and his relationship with you and the orchestra. And there's so many facets to it, and I'm happy to say the piece is incredible.
Let's
I
talk
love
about
it.
that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, if we ask Lowell now, he may say that the cello concerto is his favorite piece, right? But
well, in some ways, I think that the relationship between composer and performer is very important, and not always is it such a close relationship like mine and Lowell's. So for him to write a piece for me, I think there was. He told me, he said, "This is one of these pieces I actually really want to write," because not every piece has that personal side to it, and there are so many people asking Lowell to write music because they love his music and he's a famous guy, but that we had that history, and I felt like he really composed the work with my sound in mind, my approach to lyrical playing in mind, and I think it's really one of his finest works.
Well, he told us that the cello was one of his favorite instruments, and that he's done a few cello sonatas. He did a concertino, which was, I guess, an orchestration of a cello sonata.
Of the sonata I play, actually. Yeah.
But this is his first cello concerto, so he was really happy to do it, and I'm sure his relationship with you played into that as well.
Yeah, I think so, and it's exciting because as far as great composers of this generation. Well, first of all, they're not many. I mean, there aren't, just in the history of music, so many great composers just coming out all the time. But if there are those composers, certainly cellists would have asked them to write pieces in the past. And I think that Lowell's knowledge of the instrument comes into play. He's written 4 cello sonatas, all of which I adore. But his first, I've definitely played the most. And the first sonata he wrote, he was actually 17 years old.
Yeah, right.
And it was his Opus 3, and he studied the piece, or he worked on the piece with David Diamond, who was at Juilliard, who was Lowell's composition teacher at Juilliard, and also happened to be a very close friend of my family, and sort of an almost grandfather figure to me as a young boy.
Yeah.
So there's that connection too, which is very special to me. But even to see Lowell's voice change and develop over the course of his career, like any great composer, it's fascinating to me. And the idea, I mean, I was talking to the conductor Kevin Rhodes, who's going to perform this piece as another one of the orchestras in the consortium in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I told him about it, and he said, "Oh my God, we must do it," because he premiered Lowell's second piano concerto, and he thinks should already be part of the standard repertoire, and he was so happy. So, people are excited about music that they love and music that's great, and
yeah.
I just couldn't be happier.
We're talking with cellist Julian Schwarz, who is premiering the cello concerto of Lowell Liebermann. Those concerts, we should mention, are October 27th and 28th. It's at 8 o'clock p.m. at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle. More information at toledosymphony.com. Julian, maybe not everybody knows that your dad is a famous conductor, Gerard Schwarz, and has a big reputation for doing new music, commissioning composers, and that sort of thing. Is your interest in new music kind of related to his interest in new music? Were you raised with that mission in mind?
I think absolutely. I mean, I was so lucky to be raised with just music in general, all of the great composers of the past, but also, as you mentioned, my father's tireless devotion to promoting composers he believes in, and composers of the 20th century, American symphonists that have been completely neglected. So when I was growing up, I knew names like Walter Piston and Paul Creston and David Diamond and Howard Hanson and these type of names, just like I knew Beethoven and Bach and Verdi. So I think there's a lot of that, which is that I never really grew up considering new music new and old music old. It was just all what I had heard. And so in this age, I think repetition is more important than ever for people to hear music more than once, hear it and have it become part of what they love. I was so lucky to be able to go to 4 symphony concerts a week when I was a kid, and through my teens, actually, because the symphony in Seattle did so many repeats. And if there was a new piece, after the week, it wouldn't be new to me anymore. It would be part of my. It would be part of my the tunes I sang in the shower. It would be part of my consciousness, and so that's what I love about premiering new pieces. The mission is to make them not a novelty or something that happens once in a while, but have it be part of my career, as it has been my father's career, and to make it really very important to those who love music in general, not just contemporary music.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that people should go see both concerts.
That's exactly
instead of just one.
Thank you, Brad.
Or as the recording of the Concerto for Orchestra, you can just listen to it, and it can become as familiar to you as the Beethoven Fifth Symphony. And so that's what I'm doing currently with the concerto, is practicing it all the time and just loving it more and more. So, describe
the moment for us. How does the score make its way to you, and then what are you feeling when you first open it up and look at it?
Actually, this is probably the most excited and anxious I've felt in receiving a new piece. And what what happens actually now, it's all via email and in a PDF form.
Oh, okay.
I remember I was at the Eastern Music Festival in Greensboro, North Carolina this summer, and there was the due date for Lowell's piece, and I'm so excited to get the piece. And so he calls and he says, "Hey, I'm still working on a couple of things. Let's wait a day. I'll send it to you tomorrow." So of course it's like waiting for something in the mail that comes a day late. You're
right.
that much more excited. And then he finally sent it to me, and it was in the middle of a concert. And I'm ashamed to say that I left the concert. And
you weren't performing, were you?
I was not performing. And I dragged my wonderful pianist partner and girlfriend Marika with me, and we went into a practice room. And on my little iPhone, we opened up the link. Not the link, the attachment, and she played the piano reduction on the piano, and I sang the beautiful second movement melody and went through the whole piece this way, and it was an incredible experience. It was really, it must have been what the great soloists of the past felt when they opened a piece of a truly wonderful composer, and so that was a moment that I'll never forget. And just being, because you never know what you're going to get. You commission a piece and you know what the composer's work has been, but you don't know what they're going to choose to write at that given time.
Yes.
And I wanted a piece that sounded like Lowell's voice, and it sounds like Lowell's voice and even more. It's just everything I could have wanted. So that was the experience of me getting the piece, and it was so much fun.
That's a great story. You mentioned Lowell's voice. Can you talk a little bit about his voice and the characteristics of his music for people that may be not familiar with it?
Yes. Lowell's music has a lot of variety, but there are certain things that you can listen for. One is that he writes great melodies. That's one thing that not every composer has that gift, and he has that gift. So, for instance, in this slow movement, the second movement of the cello concerto is just one of the most beautiful melodies I think he's ever written, and I sing it often. Just in my daily life. It's so beautiful.
Well, feel free if you want to sing it for us. We're all ears.
No, but then the Toledo Symphony wouldn't be giving the world premiere.
Ah, okay. You want to keep it under wraps. Yeah.
No, but so that's one thing, which is that he writes at times hauntingly beautiful melodies, and he's a romantic. Not as far as romantic music, but like a romantic guy. And he doesn't necessarily display that all the time when you speak to him, but when you hear the music, I mean, he just has you can just imagine the kind of heart that this composer has. It's hard to hide when you write such beautiful music. And then there's an element, certain of his harmonies and certain of his rhythms are quintessential. So one aspect of his composition is the use of quintuplets, and so for a listener who might not be familiar with that means playing 5 notes in a pulse, in a beat,
right.
which can lend itself to a very flowing manner, almost ethereal. So a lot of time, like in this piece, he uses a lot of orchestral piano and harp, which lends this sort of ethereal, spooky quality to the texture of the orchestration. So that's something that also... And then he writes great virtuosic music, which is that he writes a lot of perpetual motion for solo instruments, which basically just means fast notes.
Right.
And they can be fiendishly difficult, but very exciting to listen to. So as far as his concertos, you have these great melodies, you have this ethereal texture at times, and then you have also these great virtuosic fast passages.
How much time do you have to put into this, practicing-wise, before the premiere?
Well, I mean, quite a bit.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about learning a new piece is that it takes so much more effort and commitment than playing a piece that you know and have known for a long time.
Right.
In the past couple of weeks, I've done the Elgar and the Saint-Saëns first, and those are pieces that I could, if you woke me up in the middle of the night in a year, and I could play them. So those are the kind of things that, of course, I work diligently on them, but they are so ingrained in my in my
muscle
playing
memory.
and muscle memory, but also in being able to sing. That's what I say. I only know a piece if I can sing it from beginning to end. So I know those pieces so well, and so a lot of the time spent with a new piece is learning the notes, but also internalizing the work as a whole and as a work of art. Learning the notes isn't enough. There needs to be intense involvement. So every day I'm playing it, trying to make sure that it's ingrained, and I can, because I'm the sort of the protagonist. I'm in some ways I need to embody the piece more than anybody.
Yeah. How do you know when you've gotten there, Julian? I'm thinking, if you're playing Saint-Saëns or Haydn, by muscle memory, or Elgar for that matter, how do you know when you've gotten there with the Liebermann?
It's a good question.
When Liebermann says so. That's
Regardless of the piece, in some ways I always feel like there's more to do, because I'm a perfectionist, and I'm constantly evolving. And I was saying, last just a few days ago at a pre-concert lecture, that I have live concert recordings of myself playing pieces over the past 10 years, especially something that like the Elgar, which I've played many, many times. And it's constantly changing, I think for the better, but always developing and always growing and getting more comfortable and more secure and more experimental at times. And so it's hard for me to ever say that a piece is really cooked. But as far as I know, if I can sing, I guess I'm talking a lot about singing, but it's like I tell my students, if I can sing the whole piece, which I can at this point, then that really shows me that I have internalized it. And then what I do on the instrument to bring it to life is an ever-evolving exploration.
Yeah. I love the story that you told about getting the PDF, and the question that popped into my head I've been thinking about here for the last couple of minutes is, what was the next step then for you? At what point did you go back to Lowell Liebermann and say that you liked that? I mean, it's the kind of thing where you're like, maybe I should wait a couple of days before I write him back?
That's a good question, because I wrote him back immediately.
Oh, okay.
After I had gone through it, because he was writing the piece for months, living with it, exploring it, and finally to send it to someone. I mean, he can't send it around because things can easily leak and get to others, and it's a tricky business. So for him to get some feedback right away, I think it was crucial. And I called him and left a almost squealing message about how happy I was and elated I felt because it was such an amazing piece. And then maybe 2 weeks later, I was coming back to New York City, and I went over to his home in Weehawken, New Jersey, and we had a great time playing it through together. He invited me over for lunch, and he had an assistant who had been inputting this piece for the whole summer, and they had been involved in this piece. And to finally hear it come to life, Lowell played the piano part, and I played the cello part, and we went through it a couple times. It reminds me of that great Rostropovich story about him collaborating with Shostakovich on the first concerto, and they played it through like I did with Lowell first, and then they had vodka, and then they played it through again, and then they had more vodka, and then the third time they played the Saint-Saëns concerto. One of those.
They just thought it was a Saint-Saëns concerto,
right, or something like that. But that's how
I sort of think that should be a model for these concerts.
More vodka?
Yeah,
We're working on it.
You play it once, you go out for a tea break or whatever, what have you, and come back and play it again. And then you can do the chansons.
Yeah, right. There you go. But no, it was just so much fun, and of course I hadn't yet worked out all of the technical fireworks and such, but it was still just a great afternoon. No vodka, but
Was there ever a point when you looked at Lowell and said, "But no, it goes faster here"? Or do you defer to him as a composer, or do you feel like as the dedicatee that you can lead the narrative a little bit?
Yeah, you're the one on stage after all.
Yeah, well, there is an element of that, which is that nothing you can do if I go out there and do and play whatever. But that's
if the composer is standing up and waving his arms, you know that maybe you should cool it then.
Yeah. No, but I guess it depends on the composer. I've been lucky enough to premiere a few pieces with orchestra and even more with cello and piano, and it just depends. Some composers are very wed to what they wrote. That's how it is.
Yeah.
And other composers really want advice, especially if they don't play the instrument. A lot of I have yet to really work with a cellist composer. So most of the composers I've worked with are very flexible because they don't necessarily know the ins and outs of what is technically possible and what's not technically possible, and what types of chords and playing multiple strings at once, double stops and triple stops and such, are possible on the instrument. So as far as Lowell's concerned, he was very accommodating to a few little things I had to say about this and that, but overall, it didn't really need much of many of my changes.
Yeah.
So that was great that it was so brilliantly written for the instrument that I didn't really have to change anything. There were a couple things that we discussed and exchanged, and he said maybe it's better like this, and I tried it and it was, and other things that weren't, and then he sent me an updated version. But now we got it. And hey, when we're doing the piece finally with the orchestra, it's a very exciting time. I'm sure there will be changes,
Sure.
and I'm sure there will be last minute tweaks of the orchestration or of my part, and hopefully nothing too drastic. But hey.
Cellist Julian Schwarz giving the world premiere of the Concerto for Cello and Orchestra by Lowell Liebermann. You can experience it live right there in the theater at the Toledo Museum of Art Peristyle this weekend, October 27th and 28th. Both concerts at 8 o'clock p.m. More information at ToledoSymphony.com, or you can call the box office at 419-246-8000. Julian, lots of fun talking about this. Can't wait to hear the piece and to hear you perform. And thanks so much for spending time with us here on FM 91.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this week.
Toledo Symphony Lab is generously underwritten by a gift from the estate of Barbara Garwood and is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of this program as a podcast by going to our website at WGTE.org. I'm Brad Cresswell, and you've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab here on FM 91.